I am standing here holding the last key to my grandmother's lake house, feeling the weight of 30 years of memories in my palm. This little cabin by Lake Michigan was not just a house. It was my sanctuary, my inheritance, my future. The morning sunlight danced across the water, just like it did when I was 7, catching fireflies with Grandma Sarah on warm summer evenings. I never imagined that the people who were supposed to love me most would be the ones to take it all away. Before I tell you how my own parents betrayed me in the worst possible way, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button. If you have ever felt overlooked in your family, and subscribe, because trust me, you will want to see how this story ends. When Grandma Sarah passed away 5 years ago, she left me her beautiful lake house in northern Michigan. I was 25 then, fresh out of my photography program, trying to figure out my life. That 3-bedroom log cabin, with its vintage kitchen and wraparound porch overlooking the water, became my lifeline. Every weekend, I would drive the 2 hours from Detroit to breathe in that crisp lake air and remember who I was beneath all the family chaos. The house was more than just wood and stone to me. It held decades of precious memories. Summer mornings when Grandma would make her famous blueberry pancakes while I sat cross-legged on the kitchen counter, swinging my feet and chattering about everything and nothing. Afternoons spent fishing off the old wooden dock where she taught me patience and how to bait my own hook. Evening campfires where we would roast marshmallows and she would tell me stories about her own childhood during the Great Depression. When I inherited the property, it came with a decent chunk of change from renting it out during peak summer months. Tourist families paid good money to stay in that charming lakefront retreat, and the income helped me establish my photography studio back in the city. I had found my groove, building a steady client base, doing wedding photography, and family portraits. Life felt stable for the first time in years. My family dynamic had always been complicated. My parents, Robert and Linda, had 2 daughters with a 6-year age gap. Madison, my younger sister, was 28 now and had always been the golden child. From the moment she took her first breath, she could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She got the brand new car for her 16th birthday, while I drove our old family sedan with a rattling transmission. Her college tuition was paid in full while I worked 3 part-time jobs and took out student loans that I am still paying off today. Do not get me wrong, I love Madison. She is sweet and funny when she wants to be, but she never learned the value of hard work or financial responsibility. She landed a decent marketing job after college, making around $50,000 a year, but her spending habits would make a millionaire nervous. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Chicago, all funded by credit cards, and occasional bailouts from mom and dad. Madison had been dating Derek for about 2 years when she announced their engagement last spring. Derek worked at a downtown bank and came from what appeared to be a well-established family. He drove a nice car, wore expensive suits, and always picked up the check at family dinners. My parents were thrilled with the match, already picturing their future grandchildren and country club memberships. The engagement party was held at an upscale restaurant complete with champagne toasts and a photographer that cost more than most people spend on groceries in 3 months. Madison glowed as she showed off her stunning 2-carat diamond ring, describing in elaborate detail her vision for the perfect wedding. She wanted everything to be magical, from the designer dress to the luxury venue downtown. When the initial planning began, the estimated costs quickly spiraled out of control. Madison had her heart set on the grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel, a venue that commanded premium prices for its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. The catering alone would cost $40,000 for 200 guests, not including the open bar, live band, floral arrangements, and professional videography team she absolutely had to have. The total budget climbed to $150,000, a sum that made my head spin. My parents had managed to save around $30,000 over the years, but they were nowhere near prepared for Madison's champagne dreams on a beer budget. I watched Dad's stress levels climb as he quietly applied for personal loans and considered dipping into his retirement fund. Mom tried to suggest scaling back some of the more expensive elements, but Madison would burst into tears every time anyone mentioned compromise. She would sob about how this was supposed to be the most important day of her life, how all her friends had elaborate weddings, how she had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. Dad would cave immediately, promising they would find a way to make it happen. That is when the strange questions began. During a casual Sunday dinner, Dad asked me seemingly innocent questions about the lake house. How much did I think it might be worth in today's market? Had I ever considered selling it and investing the money elsewhere? When I gave vague answers, he dropped the subject, but I caught him and Mom exchanging meaningful glances across the dinner table. A few weeks later, Mom called to tell me they were having the house appraised for insurance purposes. A man in a dark suit showed up with a clipboard and measuring tape, walking through every room and taking notes on the property's condition and recent improvements. When the appraisal came back at $180,000, I felt proud of how well I had maintained Grandma's legacy. I should have seen the warning signs, but I trusted my family completely. The idea that they would do anything behind my back never crossed my mind. I was focused on building my business and planning a photography workshop I wanted to host at the lake house that summer. Life felt peaceful and full of possibility. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in early June. I was editing photos in my studio when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, who had lived next to the lake house for 30 years. Her voice sounded confused and a little sad when she spoke. "Hello, dear. I just wanted to call and say how sorry I am to hear that you are selling the house. Your grandmother would be so proud of how beautifully you have kept it all these years. I hope the new owners will love it as much as your family has." My blood turned to ice in my veins. Selling the house. What was she talking about? I managed to stammer out some response about there being a misunderstanding while my hands shook as I hung up the phone. Immediately, I tried calling my parents, but both of their phones went straight to voicemail. A terrible feeling of dread settled in my stomach as I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to their house. When I pulled into their driveway, I could see Madison's car parked next to Derek's sleek black sedan. Through the living room window, I spotted champagne glasses and what looked like a celebration in progress. My heart hammered against my chest as I walked up to the front door and let myself in with my spare key. The scene I walked into will be burned into my memory forever. Madison was practically bouncing with excitement, her engagement ring sparkling as she gestured wildly with a champagne flute in her hand. Derek stood beside her with an uncomfortable expression, like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Mom had tears in her eyes, but they looked more like tears of relief than sadness. Dad avoided my gaze entirely suddenly, very interested in straightening magazines on the coffee table. Madison spotted me first and rushed over with her arms outstretched. "Oh my God, Paige! Thank you so much for the wedding present. This is going to make everything absolutely perfect. I cannot believe how generous you are being about this whole thing." Wedding present. The room started spinning as the pieces fell into place. I looked around at my family's guilty faces and felt something break inside my chest. They had sold my house, my inheritance, my sanctuary. They had sold it without even asking me and were celebrating like it was some kind of gift I had willingly given. "What exactly are you talking about, Madison?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded strange and distant to my own ears. Dad finally looked up from his magazine, shuffling. "Paige, honey, we can explain everything. It is for the family. Madison only gets married once, and we want to give her the wedding she deserves." Mom jumped in with her own justification, wiping at her eyes with a tissue. "Sweetheart, you are so successful now with your photography business. You can always buy another house later. Madison needs this right now for her special day, and you do not even live at the lake house full-time anyway." The casual way they dismissed my feelings and my property rights made my vision blur with rage. I turned to Madison, who was still glowing with excitement, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was celebrating the theft of my inheritance. Madison, did it ever occur to you to ask me how I felt about this before you started planning how to spend the money from selling my house? She laughed, actually laughed, and waved her hand dismissively. Come on, sis. It is not like you even live there full time. Besides, you can always visit us at the new house Derek and I are going to buy after the wedding. We are thinking about getting a place with a pool. Derek finally spoke up, his voice quiet and strained. Maybe we should talk about this privately as a family. This seems like something that should be discussed more carefully. Dad's temper flared at Derek's reasonable suggestion. There is nothing to discuss. We are Paige's parents and family comes first. We have already put down the deposit for the venue and signed contracts with all the vendors. We cannot back out now without losing everything. The truth hit me like a physical blow. They had planned this betrayal for weeks, maybe months. All those innocent questions about property values and insurance appraisals had been part of their scheme to steal my house and fund Madison's fairy tale wedding. They had never intended to ask for my permission or input. You cannot just sell my house, I shouted, my composure finally cracking. My name is on the deed. Grandma left that house to me specifically. Mom started crying harder. Please do not make this harder than it has to be. The buyers are a lovely young couple, and they are willing to close in 2 weeks. Everything is already arranged. Madison rolled her eyes and took another sip of champagne. God, Paige, why are you being so selfish about this? It is just a house. I am your sister, and this is the most important day of my life. Can you not just be happy for me for once? Just a house. Those 3 words echoed in my head as I stared at my family, seeing them clearly for the first time in my life. To them, my dreams and my inheritance, and my emotional connection to Grandma's memory, meant nothing compared to Madison's wedding fantasies. I was not their daughter or sister in that moment. I was just an obstacle to overcome. I left my parents' house that afternoon, feeling like I was walking through a nightmare. The betrayal cut so deep that I could barely think straight as I drove home to my apartment. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. A cold, calculating anger that helped me focus on what needed to happen next. The first call I made was to Michael Torres, my former classmate from law school, who now practiced real estate law in downtown Detroit. Michael and I had stayed in touch over the years, and he had always been straight with me about legal matters. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and reassuring. Paige, if your name is the only name on the deed, your parents have no legal right to sell that property. Even if they somehow forged your signature, any buyer would need to verify clear title before closing. We can stop this sale dead in its tracks. However, he warned me about the potential consequences. If my parents had already signed purchase agreements with buyers and accepted deposits, stopping the sale could result in lawsuits and financial penalties. The buyers might sue for damages if they had already made arrangements based on the promised closing date. The question is, Michael said carefully, do you want to go nuclear and destroy your family relationships, or do you want to find a more subtle way to handle this situation? I thought about Madison laughing at my pain, about my parents dismissing my feelings like I was an ungrateful child. They had chosen money over loyalty, celebration over compassion. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. Let me do some research first, I told Michael. I will call you back in a few days with a plan. That evening, I started digging into the buyers my parents had found. A few phone calls to the real estate agent led me to Jake and Amanda Morrison, a young couple in their early 30s who had been searching for a vacation home for over a year. When I called them directly and explained that I was the actual owner of the property, they were shocked and immediately sympathetic. We had no idea there were family issues involved, Amanda said during our phone conversation. The listing agent told us the owners were relocating and needed to sell quickly. We never would have moved forward if we had known this was happening without your consent. Jake and Amanda turned out to be decent people who were just as upset about being dragged into family drama as I was about having my house stolen. We worked out an arrangement where I would compensate them for their time and any costs they had already incurred, and they would withdraw their offer. They were relieved to avoid a potential legal mess and wished me luck in resolving things with my family. But I was not ready to simply reclaim my house and move on. The way Madison had laughed at my pain and dismissed my feelings had awakened something vindictive in me that demanded justice. If she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I decided to hire a private investigator to look into Derek's financial background. Something about his expensive lifestyle had never quite added up to me, and my instincts told me there was more to his story than met the eye. The investigator, a former police detective named Karen Walsh, was thorough and discreet. What she discovered exceeded my worst expectations. Derek was drowning in debt. Credit card balances totaling $85,000, a defaulted business loan from a failed restaurant investment, and a pattern of late payments on everything from his car loan to his apartment rent. His expensive suits and flashy lifestyle were all funded by borrowed money and financial lies. Even worse, Karen had discovered that Derek had been having an affair with a coworker named Jessica for the past 2 months. She provided me with photos of them together at hotels and restaurants, clear evidence that Madison was about to marry a cheating, lying, financially ruinous man. The final piece of my revenge plan came together 3 days before the wedding. I had been invited to the ceremony, of course, though my relationship with the family had been strained since our confrontation. Madison had been cold but civil, apparently choosing to believe that I would eventually come around and accept what they had done. I arrived at the venue early, dressed in a simple navy dress that would not upstage the bride. The grand ballroom looked exactly as Madison had dreamed, with white roses and crystal everywhere soft lighting that made everything look like a fairy tale. Guests were mingling in the cocktail area, sipping champagne and admiring the elaborate decorations. I found Madison in the bridal suite surrounded by her bridesmaids as they put the finishing touches on her makeup and hair. She looked absolutely stunning in her designer gown, every inch the perfect bride she had always wanted to be. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for what I was about to do. "Madison, you look absolutely beautiful," I said sincerely as I approached her. "I wanted to give you this before the ceremony starts." I handed her an elegant cream-colored envelope with her name written in calligraphy across the front. Inside were the photographs Karen had taken of Derek with Jessica, along with copies of his credit reports and financial documents. I had also included a handwritten note that simply said, "Thought you should know who you are really marrying. Love, your sister." Madison opened the envelope with a bright smile, expecting a heartfelt card or maybe a check. The smile died on her face as she looked at the first photograph. Her hands started shaking as she flipped through the evidence of Derek's betrayal and financial deception. The color drained from her face as she realized what she was looking at. "What is this?" she whispered, though we both knew exactly what it was. The bridesmaids crowded around, gasping and murmuring as they saw the photos. Madison's maid of honor immediately started trying to damage control, suggesting there might be some mistake or explanation. But the evidence was too overwhelming and too detailed to dismiss. Madison's scream of anguish could probably be heard throughout the entire hotel. She collapsed into a chair, still in her wedding dress, sobbing hysterically as the truth sank in. Her perfect wedding day was crumbling around her, but more importantly, her perfect future with Derek was revealed to be nothing but lies and debt. The confrontation with Derek happened in front of both families and half the wedding guests. Madison stormed out of the bridal suite with the photos in her hand, demanding answers from her groom. Derek's face went white when he saw what she was holding, and his stammering attempts to explain only made things worse. In the end, Madison called off the wedding right there in front of everyone. Derek slunk away in shame while guests stood around in shocked silence, unsure whether to stay or leave. The fairy tale wedding that had cost my family so much money and caused so much pain ended in a spectacular disaster that no one would ever forget. The immediate aftermath was chaos. My parents were in complete panic mode, realizing that without a wedding to pay for, They had no justification for selling my house. More importantly, they were on the hook for vendor cancellation fees that would cost them tens of thousands of dollars they did not have. The venue alone charged a $75,000 cancellation fee since the wedding was called off with less than 24 hours' notice. The catering company, florist, and band all had similar penalties in their contracts. Mom and Dad were looking at financial ruin, all for a wedding that never happened. I watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me felt vindicated seeing my family face consequences for their betrayal, but another part of me felt genuinely sorry for the pain they were experiencing. These were still my parents, despite everything they had done to me. When Michael Torres arrived at the venue with a court injunction blocking the sale of my house, Dad realized that their scheme had completely collapsed. Not only were they stuck with enormous bills from the canceled wedding, but they also no longer had access to the money from my property to pay those bills. The family confrontation that followed was brutal and necessary. Madison was devastated not just about Derek's betrayal, but about the realization that her dream wedding had cost our parents their financial security. Mom kept apologizing through her tears, admitting that they had gotten caught up in Madison's demands and lost sight of what was right. Dad was the hardest to reach. His pride was wounded, and he kept insisting that everything they had done was for the family's benefit. It took weeks of difficult conversations before he could admit that selling my house without my permission had been wrong, regardless of their motivations. The healing process was slow and painful. I made the decision to maintain the lake house as my own retreat and eventually turned part of it into a workshop space for other photographers and artists. The income from those retreats combined with my studio work gave me the financial independence I had always craved. I cut off contact with my family for 6 months while I processed my feelings and rebuilt my sense of self-worth. During that time, I realized how much of my life I had spent trying to earn their approval and acceptance. The lake house became my sanctuary in the truest sense, a place where I could remember who I was without their expectations weighing me down. Mom was the first to reach out with a genuine apology. She admitted that they had spoiled Madison to an unhealthy degree and failed to respect my independence and success. She acknowledged that their behavior had been selfish and hurtful, and she asked for the chance to rebuild our relationship on more honest terms. Madison's apology came later, after she had time to process everything that had happened. She thanked me for exposing Derek's lies before she made the biggest mistake of her life. Marrying him would have destroyed her financially and emotionally, and despite the painful way she learned the truth, she was grateful to have avoided that fate. Dad was the last to come around, but when he finally did, his apology was the most meaningful. He admitted that he had always seen Madison as the child who needed protection, and me as the child who could handle anything on my own. He realized that his favoritism had damaged both of his daughters in different ways. Today, our family relationships are better than they have been in years, built on honesty instead of manipulation. Madison has learned to live within her means and has started paying back the debts from her canceled wedding. Mom and Dad have sought financial counseling and are slowly rebuilding their retirement savings. The lake house remains my haven, a place where I can connect with Grandma's memory and remember that I am worthy of love and respect, just as I am. I have learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Family love does not mean sacrificing your own dreams and boundaries, and sometimes saving someone you care about means letting them face the consequences of their own choices. Standing on that dock where Grandma taught me to fish all those years ago, I understand now what she was really teaching me. Patience, yes, but also the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, and some battles are worth winning, even when they cost you everything you thought you knew about the people you love. That lake house taught me that home is not just where your family is. Sometimes home is where you finally learn to stand up for yourself. I would love to hear your thoughts on this situation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? What would you have done if your parents sold your inheritance without asking? Drop your comments below and let me know if you think I was right to expose Derek's secrets, or if I went too far. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama and personal growth. And do not forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is okay to put yourself first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that your dreams and boundaries matter no matter what anyone else tells you.